So I do not know exactly how long Jane worked at the New Fairfield Elementary School, but I'm gonna guess around 6 years. She first started commuting from Old Greenwich, Connecticut to New Fairfield, and then when they were in the market for a new house, instead of buying one closer to New Fairfield, for some reason, my dad insists that they get a house in Shelton. I did not hear too much of this story because it was kind of like a personal matter. But Jane reached the conclusion that she needed to go into early retirement when she was just in her mid-50s. And I think that they were going to give her something like full retirement to retire from New Fairfield Elementary School in the fall of 2006. They decided to have a retirement party for Jane. So it took place at the Amber Room, which is right outside of New Fairfield in Danbury. They have weddings there, and it's a hall that you could rent out. And I think it took place right around October because it was also a Halloween party for some reason. And these are where all the photographs were taken. So this was the New Fairfield Elementary School staff and teachers Halloween party / Jane's retirement. So for the most part, I think the attention was on like an award ceremony and a Halloween party. And then of course they had a segment of their little show where they all gave thanks to Jane. And she walked up and shook someone's hand and was given some sort of award. So that took place at the Amber Room in Danbury. So these are the photographs of the people from New Fairfield Elementary School. It was called Consolidated, I think. And this is some of the staff and teachers from the New Fairfield education system. I think that they're mostly from the Consolidated School System in New Fairfield. So she retired around the fall of 2006. And I know that seems like an odd time to retire because it was at the beginning of a school year. But that's what they did for one reason or another. And once again, these people specialize in doing strange things and making people feel bad, to say the least. And I remember my brother, myself, and my ex-wife, Rachel, being invited to Jane's retirement party in Danbury, Connecticut at the Amber Room. And we took a few photographs. And the rest of these I found in my dad's photo album. He was also taking photographs. And I got these around 2013 or 2014. And I opened up the photo album and I was looking through the photo album, and these ladies stood out as being exceptional. So I took these photographs out of the photo album. So even though Jane had a negative experience at the New Fairfield Elementary School, almost 1 year later, my dad suggests that I get a job over there. The same place where Jane had this negative experience at, and it was so bad that she had to go into early retirement. This is the place where my dad thinks I should go apply for a job too, because he has caught wind that they are hiring a custodian, and there's a custodian position open at the middle school. So Jane and my dad have heard of this, and my dad calls me up and says, why don't you go apply for that job? And they'll pay you $14 an hour to be a night custodian. So this is the New Fairfield School System, and it is a large building with the middle school on one side and the high school on the other. It's a giant complex that encompasses both the middle school and the high school. And just to tell you, it looked a little bit odd. The architecture of this high school suggested something like a strange amusement park. I wish I got more of it on video. But the whole place looked odd as far as the architecture goes. And they had several of these red, triangular or pyramid-shaped canopies. They looked like they were corrugated metal, but there were these pointed canopies all over the school. So it gave it this amusement park or kind of fairy tale look to it. It didn't look like a traditional conservative school. I've seen a lot of schools, and I've never seen something look as strange as the school system in New Fairfield. It was very odd looking. So they ended up hiring me as the night custodian. And what they said is that there was a 3-month probation period. And after 3 months, after 90 days, you would be hired on through the union. And at that point, they would start taking union dues out of your check. But you would also be entitled to insurance. And once you made it into the union, you were hired on as kind of a permanent employee over there. And as many of you know, union employees have a lot more rights than just regular employees. It was right at the end of August when I started working there. And at the middle school, there was a guy named Dan Bowen. And Dan was this real heavy-set fat guy who was covered with tattoos. And he was the boss of the custodians at the middle school. But he worked during the day. And right at about 3 o'clock, when the night custodians were coming to work, he would be leaving for the day. And we had a supervisor named Steve Hagan. And Steve Hagan supervised the 2 custodians of the middle school. And we were both hired at the same time. And it was me and a guy named Rob Kirsting. So we were supposed to be trained and supervised by Steve Hagan. So right from the start, Steve Hagan began to act in a very harassing manner. And that would be, he would not respect your personal space. He would walk right up to you and talk to you with his face only a few inches away from you. He would get right in your face. And if you kind of backed up or took a step back, he would take a step forward and stick his face right back in your face. And sometimes he would reach out and try to put his hand on you. And I'm not exaggerating to tell you that his breath smelled like raw sewage. So after a few days of this, I said to him, with the utmost respect, could you please not stand so close to me? And he's like, why? And I say, I'm just not used to that sort of thing. And I'm used to people giving each other a little bit of personal space. And he looked like he was slightly insulted, but I believe that he knew what he was doing the whole time. And he would do that to provoke people. What he also would do was insist that we eat together. He said, we all have dinner together in the teacher's lunchroom. And when it was time for our break, I went to the lunchroom and I met Steve and Kirsting. And we sat there eating lunch. And I was social and I made small talk. And when I got finished eating, I stood up to walk outside to call my wife on my cell phone. And he said, where are you going? Dinner's not over yet. And I said, I'm going to go call my wife. And he said, yeah, that's okay, I guess. But we usually take breaks together. So once again, he was trying to provoke me. This is not something a normal supervisor would do. Insist that the people that he supervised eat dinner with him every night. And after they're finished eating, they should ask him permission to leave the table and go make a personal phone call. This is something a dictator would do. This is not something your supervisor at your job should be entitled to do. So at that point, I realized that something was not right with Steve Hagan. So around that time, it was the first or second week of being employed there, I started noticing that there was damage done to my vehicle. So if you go look at your license plate, you will see the screws that hold the license plate on. So it looked like somebody was taking their car and was kind of bumping into mine. Not hard enough to crack the bumper, but hard enough to scratch it a little bit and leave these indents, these marks that look like 2 license plate screw heads. And they were bumping into the car a few different times. So I did not know if it was happening at work or if it was happening at my condo. So what I did was I washed the car, tried to buff it out the best I could, and kind of noted down where the marks were right at the beginning of my next shift. And then later that day, I walked out and noticed that sometime during the day, more marks appeared on the vehicle. So it was happening at my job. So I decided to report that at that point. So I asked Dan Bowen if he wouldn't mind staying late, a little later after work one day, so that I could have a word with him. So I told him that some damage was happening to my vehicle. And this vehicle was a new vehicle to me. It was used, but it was in really good shape and it was new to me. And I did not like seeing all these scratches and circle marks all over my car. So I reported it, and he said that it could be kids. He said, "Where are you parking?" And I told him, "Right outside the wing where our custodial office is." And he says, "That's right overlooking the football field. So sometimes kids may park over there or lean on your car while they're watching a game." And I said, "Okay." So the marks continued to happen. It looked like they were using the back of my car for target practice. And this always happened as soon as I got to the school. So I got a yardstick out of one of the classrooms, and I went outside and I measured how tall these marks were. And I went around to the other vehicles and I measured from the street up to their license plate screws. And it did not match up with any car out there, with the exception of one person's car. And that was Steve Hagan's car. So I went to Dan again and I said, "It's still happening to my vehicle. And this is happening when there's not any kids out. It's happening when there's no games here. The parking lot empties out. We pull in, there's only a few cars here. And for some reason, every day I'm getting all these marks all over the car." And he says, "Well, do you think it's somebody who works here?" And I said, "I would hope not." So I really do not want to name any names, but I definitely want it to stop. If there's any way you could think of making that stop. And he goes, "Well, do you think I'm doing it?" And I said, "No." And he says, "Do you think that Rob's doing it? The guy that was hired at the same time as you?" And I say, "No." And he says, "Do you think that Steve is doing it?" And I say, "Well, this is what I found out." And I told him how the marks lined up exactly with Steve's car. And I went out there and I showed him. And he said, "Well, since you're new, you just got hired, and Steve's been here for a few years, and he's part of the union. If there is some sort of problem between you two guys, it's going to be you who gets fired, because he's in the union and you're not. But I'll have a word with him anyway." So I was just hoping to get him to stop. I didn't know what else to do. So Steve was the only person that seemed to have a problem with me working there. Steve was the only person to attempt to provoke me. It was like he was doing it all on purpose. So around that time, the damage to the vehicle stopped. And this was around 2 or 3 weeks after being employed there. But something even worse started to happen. And that was, I started to get all these sores on my arms and legs. I would get these welts and blisters all over my arms and legs. And I started to take video of all these marks that were appearing on my arms and legs. So at first I did not know what to make of it. And the way Steve had things set up is that he would come to work a little early. He would get there like around 2:30. And he said that it was his job as the supervisor to go into your personal closet. We all had our own custodian closet for what wings that we were responsible for. And Steve said it was his responsibility to go mix up the soap in my mop bucket at the beginning of every shift. And he would do that for me, and he would also do that for Rob. So one day, I decided to take a good look at the bucket that was prepared for me by Steve. And the dispenser that put out the floor cleaner did not seem to be the same stuff that was in the mop bucket that was prepared for me by Steve every afternoon. So I poured out the mop bucket, rinsed it out, and I mixed up new water and new soap. And would you guess, the sores from my legs and my arms began to disappear. That worked well for a week or two. And then one day when I get to work, I open up the custodial closet, I see my mop bucket prepared there for me, I start pouring out the water, and all of a sudden Steve is standing behind me saying, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm changing the mop bucket's water." And he said, "What are you talking about? I just put that in there for you." And I said, "Well, it looked a little murky, so I'm mixing some stuff up fresh." And he looked disturbed and pissed off, and he walks away looking a little bit strange. So at that point, when I walked out to my car later on that night, I saw that someone had wiped some white residue all over the window of my car. It was all over the window, the door, and the door handle. And it looked like soap, some faint white soap. So I went back inside, I got some Windex, and I wiped off the car the best that I could. So around that time, I started breaking out with this terrible rash that went all over my back and my shoulders and my neck. And once again, I took a bunch of video because these rashes would appear every day. They would seem to fade during the weekend and start to go away. But then I would go to work on Monday and they would be right back. So one day I get home and my rash is worse than normal. I got these terrible hives all over my back, and I go to the bathroom to take a shower, and I start to take off my shirt, and it just so happens that it is a white t-shirt, and I see these stains on the back of the t-shirt, and the stains line up right where the straps are for our backpack vacuum cleaners. They have these backpack vacuum cleaners at the job that you wear on your back like a leaf blower, but it's connected to a vacuum. I take the shirt off and there are these marks. They look like stains, like wax, and it's a little yellow in places, right where the straps fit on your back and the vacuum sits on your back. So it seems that somebody was applying something to the vacuum pack, and suddenly all these hives are appearing on my back. So at this point, my skin is inflamed and I'm getting these rashes all over my body. And it is so bad that you could take your fingernail and draw like a circle. Just take your fingernail, lightly draw a circle on your arm, and the skin would show a bright red circle on your arm. And I think that this inflammation has to do with somebody dumping something in my mop bucket every day for the first couple of weeks I worked there, applying some substance all over my car, like on the door handles and on the window, and they're also placing something all over the vacuum pack that I wear, and they are probably putting this chemical over everything that I touch. And after about a month of working there, my skin gets inflamed. So I report this to Dan, and Dan says I talked to a guy named Phil Ross, who is the director of buildings and grounds, and they've decided to send me over to corporate health, which is located in Danbury. And the doctor says that he cannot say that this is work related because I worked there using the chemicals for a few weeks before I started getting a rash. So I guess his logic was that if you're allergic to something, it's going to show up right away. So due to that finding by John Fisher, PAC, from Corporate Health, 41 Germantown Road in Danbury, per his analysis, I was not allergic to any of the regular cleaners that they have there. So they prescribed me Benadryl, 25 to 50 milligrams of Benadryl, which is an antihistamine. So my skin is inflamed now. It's agitated. And I know that it's due to being subjected to all these weird chemicals that are appearing all over my personal stuff and work equipment. I was only allergic to whatever somebody may be applying to my car, to my backpack vacuum cleaner, and dumping into the mop bucket because he may be nice enough to want to show up early to make sure that I get all the right cleaners in the spray bottles and mop bucket because Steve Hagan is such a great supervisor at New Fairfield Middle School. So every custodian had their own closet. So one day I got to work and I went to my janitor's closet and I noticed that my spray bottle that had Windex in it looked like another cleaner entirely. It wasn't a dark blue color. It was very obviously different that day. It was like almost a pale green color. So I wanted to compare it to what the other guys were using. So sometime during the day, I went up to Rob Kirsting's closet and I took out one of his spray bottles for Windex and I compared the two. And as you can see, the one on the left is the one that Rob Kirsting had in his closet, and it is a dark blue color. And then the one on the right is the one that Steve or somebody prepared for me, and it was a light green color. So what I started to do was bring my camera every day to work to try to catch as much of this on video as I could. And when I would walk by Steve or Rob's closet, sometimes I would open it up just to see if I could find anything in there. And it was an accepted practice if you're cleaning a part of the school and there's a custodial closet near you and you need something out of it, you could just go over to that custodial closet and help yourself, because we all had keys to each other's closet. So I think I needed gloves. So I opened up Rob Kirsting's closet and I saw two jugs on the floor. One on the left was the blue Windex type cleaner, and it was right next to a jug with a white colored cleaner in it. And I had never seen that cleaner before. And when I was trained to clean the school, nobody mentioned this type of cleaner. And it was called Clean and Burnish Restorer. And it said right on the container, eye and skin irritant. Wear safety goggles and gloves when handling the concentrate. So it appeared like Steve Hagan or Rob Kirsting was mixing these two cleaners together. And this most likely was what was winding up in my spray bottles to make them look like this, to make them look like a pale green color. So, since this was an eye and skin irritant, when they were putting this in my spray bottles, and I was going around spraying all the mirrors, this is what was getting on my arms and my face and my neck and my clothes. So as you can see from this video, this was also affecting my eyes. You could see the ridge above my eyes began to stick out. It began to protrude a little bit, and I began to get welts all along my forehead and above my eyes in my eyebrow ridge. So it looked like this. Clean and Burnish Restore Concentrate is what they were putting into the mop bucket and also the spray bottles. And that was causing me to have this allergic reaction. So I began to pour out the spray bottles as well and rinse them out and fill them up again. So then about a week later, I did find another weird cleaner in Rob Kirsting's closet, and it said hydrogen 2 Orange concentrate 117. And it read, caution, precautionary statements, hazards to humans and domestic animals. Caution, causes moderate eye damage. Avoid contact with eyes, skin, and clothing. Only by diluting this product will it be non-irritating. It also said not to be used as a terminal cleaner. And I believe that means that after using this cleaner, you should use something else to clean up this cleaner. Because this is some very potent stuff that I think is marketed for hospitals to kill biohazardous material, diseases, and to clean up spills and stuff like blood, contaminated blood. So this was kind of hidden on a shelf in the back of Rob Kirsting's closet. So at that point, I thought I got them pretty good. The other cleaner, the Clean and Burnish Restore Concentrate, was the same brand of cleaning products that we used in the school. But this was something different and looked out of place. And it said right on it, hazards to human and domestic animals. Caution. Causes moderate eye damage. Avoid contact with eyes, skin, and clothing. So at that point, I thought I should bring that to Dan's attention immediately. So I took video of that product, and then the next day, I called him and asked if I could see him at the end of his shift to bring something to his attention. And I told him, I found a cleaning product in Rob Kirsting's closet that does not seem to belong there. It isn't part of the product line of the cleaners that we use in the school. And there's all these warnings and statements to use extreme caution that this causes moderate eye damage and was a skin irritant. And I say, as you know, Dan, I've had this terrible rash and it seems to go away on the weekends. But when I come back and I start to work, I seem to get the rash again. As you know, I found damage to my vehicle. I have found something white smeared on my window and door of the vehicle. And I've had these little problems since I started working here. And what is odd is that I found a strange cleaning product in Rob Kirsting's custodial closet. And he said, show me. So we walked upstairs together and I pointed where it was on the shelf. And he picked it up and he looked at it and he read it. And he looked pissed off. And he doesn't say a word to me. And he takes that bottle and he walks downstairs. And he says, that will be all, John. So the next day he says, I talked to Phil Ross. And that was used about a year ago for some special purpose. They had to use that to get something off of a floor. And I say to him, well, do you think that that may be possibly what has given me rashes? If someone were to come and mix up the mop bucket water every morning for me, that will cause all these terrible sores to appear on my legs that I have shown you. Do you think that this may be the cause of that? And he says something like, why on earth would someone go put that in your mop bucket? I don't think anybody would do that. So what I want to say about Dan, and he was directly under Phil Ross. So what is odd is that these terrible things went on for months on end. And the whole time I am reporting what is happening and they don't see a potential problem. Him and Phil Ross don't say, you know something? Something isn't working out. So if you've been here for a couple of weeks, you have an allergic reaction, let's just stop your employment here right from the get-go. Obviously something is not working here. If you're a boss, if you're the director of building and grounds, and you have a supervisor, a custodial supervisor that's been there for a few years, he's on the union, and you just hire a new guy who is reporting all these problems to you. Most normal directors or managers will say, I think that you have an allergic reaction to some of the cleaning products we have here, and I would recommend that you stop working here because something isn't working out. There's just too many problems. It's something that you want to stop right away. If it's some political thing where you can't side with a new guy on probation over a made union guy, that just goes against protocol, that just goes against management. You might want to terminate this new employee pretty quickly if people are going out there and damaging his car and wiping chemicals on his car and doing stuff to make these terrible blisters and sores appear all over his body that he's asking you for help for, and then finding all of this weird stuff that he's bringing to your attention. You may want to terminate that employment early. But guess how long Phil Ross, the director of buildings and grounds, and Dan Bowen, the manager of all the custodians at the middle school, and Steve Hagan, the night supervisor of custodians, guess how long they want to prolong this? As long as they possibly can. They cannot get enough of this. They want to have this go on as long as they can, which is for the entire 90-day probation period. And right at the 90 days, they have a little meeting. Phil Ross, Dan Bowen, Steve Hagan, and even Rob Kirsting, they have a little meeting and they decide that I need to be fired right before I make it onto the union. They did not wait a single day before, and they could not wait for a single day after, because then they would have to compete with the union. So that right there suggests a group of people who are at the very least inept, if not cruel. So that is the New Fairfield Custodial Department, run by Phil Ross, the director of buildings and grounds. So it's kind of funny that something happens to my stepmother named Jane at the New Fairfield School System, and then she has to go into early retirement at the age of 55. And they all have this weird Halloween retirement party in October, and then they let her go. And a year later, my dad suggested I go over to the same place that Jane had a problem with to get hired on as a night custodian, so that my skin could suddenly swell up with boils and hives and sores for 90 days, while the director, the manager, and the supervisor just don't know what to do. And they stretch it out for 3 months and wait for the exact moment to where I'll be hired on as a permanent employee, and then they have to let me go. So that is the New Fairfield School System, a wonderful town called New Fairfield, and worthy of any investigation that anyone may do. So I reported this incident to the New Fairfield police, and I told them essentially what I just told you now. And the cop just sat there with his head hanging down. And at the end of me explaining this to him, he says there's not much that I could do except file this report. So I said, doesn't it kind of disturb you that you have these type of people working around kids? Because I'll hate to see this guy getting upset at somebody else, like the school kids there, and then them getting the same thing onto them. Doesn't it kind of bother you that somebody like that works there? Because the last thing I want is my job back. I don't want to work there anymore. But I want to report this because you potentially have a psychotic lunatic working there. So that may be of interest to your new Fairfield school system. And he sits there looking down. And he repeats, there's not much that I could do. I will file the report, but there is just nothing that I could do about it. So right as I was leaving, I said to him, so it looks like the bad guys won. And honestly, he says, for now.